The whip cracked against Isadora's back for the third time that morning, each lash tearing through the thin fabric of her worn dress. She gritted her teeth, refusing to give Master Cornelius the satisfaction of hearing her cry out. Blood trickled down her spine as she continued scrubbing the wooden floors of the grand plantation house in 1847 Texas, her knees raw from 10 years of this torment. "You missed a spot, girl," Cornelius bellowed, his boots thundering across the pristine floor she'd just cleaned. At 25, Isadora had known nothing but chains since she was 15, sold like cattle after her parents died of fever. Her once bright hazel eyes had dulled to the color of autumn leaves, but something fierce still burned within them, flame that refused to die. The sound of galloping hooves outside made Cornelius pause mid-swing. Through the tall windows, dust clouds rose on the horizon as riders approached at breakneck speed. Isadora's heart hammered as she recognized the distinctive war paint and feathered headdresses of Apache warriors, their bronzed bodies moving as one with their painted horses. Apache raiders. Someone screamed from the yard. Cornelius dropped his whip and stumbled backward, his face draining of color. "Lock the doors! Get the rifles!" But his voice cracked with terror as arrows whistled through the air, finding their marks with deadly precision. Isadora slowly rose to her feet, her shackled hands trembling not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in a decade: hope. The lead Apache warrior dismounted with fluid grace, his obsidian hair braided with eagle feathers, war paint streaking his high cheekbones. When his dark eyes met hers through the window, time seemed to freeze. Something passed between them. Understanding that transcended words, cultures, and the chaos erupting around them. His name was Ayanch, meaning eternal in his tongue, though she wouldn't learn this until later. What she knew in that electric moment was that her world was about to change forever. The front door splintered under the force of his shoulder. Cornelius reached for his pistol, but Ayanch moved like lightning, his tomahawk finding its target before the cruel master could draw his weapon. Around them, the plantation burned as other warriors freed the enslaved workers, cutting their chains with swift, precise strikes. Ayanch approached Isadora slowly, his calloused hands gentle as he examined the shackles around her wrists. His touch sent shivers through her battered body, not of fear, but of awakening. For 10 years she'd been treated as property, but in his eyes she saw something that made her soul soar: respect. "You come," he said in broken English, his voice like distant thunder. "You free now?" Isadora stared at this warrior who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she'd stopped believing would be heard. The flames reflected in his eyes promised both destruction and rebirth. As the metal shackles fell from her wrists with a satisfying clank, she realized that sometimes salvation arrived not as expected, but exactly as needed. Behind them, the plantation house burned, taking with it a decade of nightmares. Ahead lay the vast Texas wilderness and an uncertain future with a man whose very presence made her believe in tomorrow again. 3 weeks into their journey across the unforgiving Texas plains, Isadora discovered that freedom came with its own challenges. The Apache band moved like shadows across the landscape, their horses' hooves barely disturbing the earth. Ayanch had given her a painted mare named Whispered Wind, and though her body ached from riding, her spirit soared higher with each mile that separated her from the plantation. The other warriors, Nalnish, Goyekla, and young Bamisi, watched her with curious eyes but growing respect. She'd proven herself by tending their wounds with herbs she'd learned to identify during her years of forced labor, and by her refusal to complain despite the harsh conditions. Ayanch rode beside her often, teaching her Apache words while she helped him improve his English. "Shiji," he would say, pointing to himself. "Ayanch." Then he'd point to her, waiting patiently as she struggled with the unfamiliar sounds of his language. "What does your name mean?" she asked one evening as they camped beside a trickling stream. The firelight danced across his angular features, making him appear both fierce and beautiful. Eternal, he replied, his eyes never leaving her face. My grandmother say I have old soul, live many lifetimes. He paused, studying her intently. You have name that means? Isadora smiled sadly. Gift of the goddess. Though I haven't felt like much of a gift these past 10 years. Ayanch reached across the small space between them, his fingers barely grazing her scarred wrist. You gift to my people now. You bring medicine, bring healing. His touch lingered, and she felt heat. Spread up her arm. You bring light to dark places in heart. That night, she lay beneath the star-scattered sky, listening to the distant howl of coyotes and the soft breathing of sleeping warriors. For the first time since childhood, she felt truly safe. But more than that, she felt desired, valued, seen as a woman rather than property. Their destination was a hidden canyon where Ayanch's tribe made their winter camp. As they drew closer, Isadora's nervousness grew. Would the Apache women accept her? Would the elders approve of Ayanch's decision to bring an outsider into their sacred space? Her fears were addressed when they encountered a hunting party led by Wistba, Ayanch's sister. The woman was striking, with intricate tattoos covering her arms and a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through to one's soul. She spoke rapidly to Ayanch in Apache, her tone sharp with questions. She asks why you bring white woman to our people, translated young Bemisi, who'd grown fond of Isadora during their journey. She says white women bring only trouble. Ayanch's response was firm and lengthy. Though Isadora couldn't understand the words, she heard the conviction in his voice, saw the way his hands moved expressively as he spoke. Whatever he said caused Wistba's expression to shift from suspicion to consideration. Finally, Wistba approached Isadora directly. She walked in a slow circle around her, examining everything from her sun-darkened skin to her calloused hands to the way she sat her horse with growing confidence. You run from white man's world? Wistba asked in surprisingly clear English. I was freed from it, Isadora replied honestly. Your brother broke my chains. Chains on body easy to break, Wistba observed. Chains on spirit ... different matter. She studied Isadora's face intently. You still have chains on spirit? Isadora considered this carefully. Did she? The fear was still there, the memories of cruelty and degradation. But something else was. Growing stronger each day, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of unexpected love blooming in the most unlikely of places. Some, she admitted, but they grow weaker each day. Wistba nodded slowly, then spoke again to Ayanch. This time, her tone was approving. She reached into her leather pouch and withdrew a small turquoise pendant. For you, she said, placing it around Isadora's neck. Welcome to family, sister. The hidden canyon revealed itself like a secret whispered by the earth itself. Towering red walls rose on either side, creating a natural fortress where the Chiricahua Apache had built their winter refuge. Isadora gasped as they descended into the valley, seeing dozens of wickiups dotting the canyon floor, their dome-shaped structures blending seamlessly with the landscape. Children ran to greet the returning hunting party, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. But their joyful shouts died when they spotted Isadora. Soon, she found herself the center of curious stares and whispered conversations. Some faces showed suspicion, others mere curiosity, but a few held unmistakable hostility. They wonder if you bring soldiers, Ayanch explained quietly as they dismounted near his family's wickiup. White people usually mean death for my people. An elderly woman emerged from the largest dwelling, her weathered face bearing the authority of years and wisdom. Her name was Naratena, grandmother to Ayanch and matriarch of their clan. She moved with deliberate slowness, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she approached the newcomer. She spoke to Ayanch in rapid Apache, her tone questioning but not unkind. Then she turned her attention to Isadora, walking around her in the same manner as Wistba had done, but with even more intensity. "Grandmother asks to see your hands," Ayanch translated. Isadora held out her palms, showing the calluses and scars from years of hard labor. Naratina examined them carefully, then nodded approvingly before speaking again. "She says your hands no work, no suffering. This is good soft hands cannot survive in this world." Ayanch's voice carried pride. "She also says your spirit is ... like wounded eagle learning to fly again." Over the following days, Isadora threw herself into learning the ways of her new people. Wistba taught her to weave baskets from willow shoots, while other women showed her how to prepare traditional foods and identify medicinal plants. Her knowledge of herbs, gained during her enslaved years, proved invaluable, and gradually the suspicious looks began to transform into respectful nods. But it was her growing relationship with Ayanch that drew the most attention. Each evening, they would walk together along the canyon stream, sharing stories of their different worlds. She told him about the books she'd secretly learned to read, hidden in the plantation's library during stolen moments. He spoke of Apache traditions, of the spiritual connection his people felt to the land. "In my world," she said one evening as they sat beside a natural pool, "women are considered property, passed from father to husband like livestock." "Apache women different," Ayanch replied, his fingers trailing in the clear water. "Women choose their own path, choose their own man. Some become warriors, some become medicine women. All are respected." The concept was revolutionary to Isadora. Freedom not just from bondage, but freedom to choose her own destiny. It was intoxicating. Their first kiss happened under a canopy of stars. Sweet and tentative, a question asked and answered without words. But their growing love faced challenges. Beyond cultural differences, a warrior named Chago had been courting Wistba's friend Itzel, but his attention had shifted to the exotic newcomer. His pursuit was relentless and unwelcome. "Chago says Apache woman better for Apache warrior," young Bamisi reported to Isadora one morning, his face troubled. "Says you bring bad spirits to tribe." The confrontation came to a head during the harvest moon ceremony. As the tribe gathered to celebrate the season's bounty, Chago publicly challenged Ayanch's right to court a white woman. His words, though spoken in Apache, needed no translation. The hostile tone and pointing gestures made his meaning clear. Ayanch rose slowly, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. But before he could respond, Isadora stepped forward. In halting but determined Apache, she addressed the crowd. "I know I am different," she said, her voice carrying across the silent gathering. "I know I am outsider. But I offer my life to this tribe, my skills to serve the people, my heart to honor Apache ways." Then, shocking everyone including herself, she issued a challenge that would change everything. "If Chago believes Apache woman better, let him find one who will have him. But I am here by choice, and I choose Ayanch as he chooses me." The canyon erupted in surprised murmurs. Never before had a white woman spoken so boldly at their gathering. But Naratina's weathered face showed something that might have been approval. And when Ayanch stepped up beside Isadora, his chest swelled with pride. The real test of her place in the tribe, however, was still to come. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the canyon in snow and driving temperatures below freezing. It was during this harsh season that Isadora faced her greatest trial and her greatest triumph. A hunting party returned with devastating news. Soldiers from Fort Bowie had discovered their summer camp and were tracking their winter hideout. Worse, they'd captured 3 Apache children during a raid, holding them as leverage to force the tribe's surrender. They want me, Isadora realized, her blood running cold as Ayanch translated the soldiers' demands. They're using those children to get me back. The debate that followed was fierce and divided. Some tribal members argued for returning her to avoid further bloodshed. Others, led by Ayanch and Wistba, insisted that giving up one of their own to white soldiers would set a dangerous precedent. I won't let children suffer for my freedom, Isadora declared. I'll go to them myself. No. Ayanch's voice was stone. You are Apache now. We protect our own. But Isadora had already begun forming a plan, a desperate gambit that would either free the captured children or cost her everything. That night, she slipped away from the camp, taking only her horse and a few supplies. She left behind a letter written in charcoal on birch bark, explaining her intentions to Ayanch. She was barely 5 miles from the canyon when Ayanch caught up with her, accompanied by Nalnish and Goyakla. His face was a mask of fury and fear. You? Think you go alone to die for honor? He demanded. This is not Apache way. Apache way is family fights together. This isn't your fight, she protested, but even as she said it, she knew the words were wrong. You are my woman, Ayanch replied fiercely. Your fight is my fight. Your people are my people. He gestured to his companions. Our fight. Their plan was audacious. Infiltrate the soldiers' camp, free the children, and disappear into the wilderness before the cavalry could organize pursuit. It required everything Isadora had learned during her months with the Apache: stealth, courage, and absolute trust in her companions. The soldiers had made camp in a box canyon, confident in their superior firepower and assuming the Apache wouldn't risk attacking a fortified position. They hadn't counted on having someone who knew military routines from her years serving in the plantation house, where Confederate officers had often visited. Isadora's knowledge of their patterns proved invaluable. She knew when sentries would change, when officers would retire to their tents, when the greatest confusion would reign. Under cover of darkness, the small Apache band struck like ghosts. The children, 2 boys and a girl, none older than 10, were bound inside a supply tent. Isadora's fingers worked frantically at the ropes while Ayanch and the others created distractions around the camp perimeter. But as they prepared to escape, disaster struck. A sleepy soldier stumbled from his tent at the wrong moment, saw shadowy figures by the supply wagon, and raised the alarm. Suddenly the canyon erupted with shouting voices and rifle fire. In the chaos, Isadora found herself face to face with Captain Morrison, the same officer who'd visited Cornelius's plantation months earlier. Well, Morrison drawled, his pistol aimed at her heart. The runaway slave returns. Did you really think those savages could protect you? I am not running any more, Isadora replied with quiet dignity. And they are not savages, they are my family? Morrison's laugh was cold. Your family? A white woman consorting with Apache? You're nothing but a traitor to your own race. My own race enslaved me, beat me, treated me like property, she shot back. These people gave me respect, gave me love, gave me a home. Who are the real savages? Before Morrison could respond, an arrow sprouted from his shoulder, spinning him around. Ayanch materialized from the shadows, his face painted for war, his eyes blazing with protective fury. The battle was brief but vicious. When dawn broke over the canyon, 3 soldiers lay dead, several others wounded, and the Apache party was already miles away with the rescued children. But Isadora carried a bullet wound in her side, and fever was setting in. For days, she drifted between consciousness and delirium as the small band raced back toward their winter camp. Ayanch rode beside her, supporting her in the saddle, his Worried prayers mixing with her fevered dreams. It was young Chenoa, one of the rescued children, who finally pulled her back from death's threshold. "You saved us," the little girl whispered, placing her small hand on Isadora's forehead. "Now you must stay and be our new grandmother." When Isadora's eyes finally opened clear and aware, she found herself back in the canyon, surrounded by the entire tribe. Naratena sat beside her, grinding healing herbs with practiced hands. "Grandmother says you have proven yourself," Ayanch translated, his voice thick with emotion. "Says you have earned right to new name, to true place in tribe." The naming ceremony was held 3 days later when Isadora was strong enough to stand. Naratena painted her face with sacred symbols and spoke in Apache while the entire tribe gathered to witness. "Your new name is Enola," Ayanch told her, pride shining in his dark eyes. "It means solitary black fox, clever, brave, beautiful, and dangerous when cornered." As the tribe chanted her new name, Isadora, now Enola, felt the last of her old identity fall away like discarded shackles. She was no longer a slave, no longer even just a free woman. She was Apache, she was Ayanch's beloved, she was home. Spring brought both renewal and danger to the canyon. As wildflowers bloomed, and the Apache prepared for their seasonal migration, disturbing news arrived through their network of scouts. The U.S. Army had placed a bounty on the heads of the war party that had freed the children, with special emphasis on capturing the white squaw who leads raids against American forces. "They make you sound like great war chief," Desba teased, but her eyes held worry. The bounty was substantial enough to tempt even friendly tribes to betray their location. Enola found herself at the center of increasingly heated tribal councils. Some members, led by an elder named Taza, argued that her presence brought too much danger to the band. Others, including most of the younger warriors, saw her as a valuable asset, whose knowledge of white customs and military tactics could help them survive the encroaching American expansion. "We cannot run forever," Taza argued during one particularly tense gathering. "Every day we keep her, more soldiers come to our land. Soon they bring big guns, many horses. What then?" Ayanch stood to respond, his voice carrying the authority of a respected war leader. "Enola has proven herself with blood and courage. She chose us when she could have chosen safety. Now we choose her, or we are not worthy of the name Apache." But the debate was interrupted by urgent news. A large cavalry force had been spotted 2 days' ride from their position, moving with the systematic precision of a major expedition. This wasn't a random patrol, this was a full-scale hunt. "They have Apache scouts with them," reported Bamisi, who'd grown into a skilled reconnaissance warrior under Ayanch's training. "Mescalero and Lapan both. They know Canyon, know our ways." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Apache fighting Apache, the ultimate betrayal in their culture. It meant the soldiers had detailed intelligence about traditional hiding places, seasonal patterns, even likely escape routes. That night, as the tribe prepared for emergency evacuation, Ayanch and Enola sat together beside the dying embers of their fire. The weight of leadership and impossible choices pressed down on both of them. "Maybe Taza is right," Enola whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind through the canyon walls. "Maybe I should leave, draw them away from the tribe." Ayansh turned to face her, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "You speak of leaving like white woman still lives inside Apache heart. But Apache woman does not abandon family for safety. Apache woman doesn't bring destruction to those she loves," she countered. "Apache woman fights for her people, fights for her children, fights for future." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "Besides, now you carry more than yourself." Enola's breath caught. She'd suspected for weeks but hadn't been certain until recent symptoms confirmed her hopes and fears. You know? Apache husband always knows, he smiled, though worry shadowed his eyes. Child needs both parents, needs safe place to grow. The pregnancy changed everything. Suddenly, their personal struggle became about something larger, the future itself. Their child would be living proof that two worlds could unite, that love could transcend the boundaries others sought to enforce. The evacuation began before dawn. The entire band moved like shadows through secret trails known only to their people, abandoning their winter sanctuary for more defensible positions deeper in the mountains. But they weren't the only ones moving. Chago, the warrior who'd once challenged Ayansh's right to court Inola, had been leading increasingly aggressive raids against nearby settlements. His actions were drawing additional military attention to the region, and whispers suggested he was deliberately trying to force a confrontation that would eliminate his romantic rival. The crisis came to a head when Chago returned from a raid. With devastating news, he'd been captured by soldiers and offered his freedom in exchange for information about Inola's location. He'd refused, but not before learning that the military expedition included someone who claimed to know her personally. White man with scar on face, Chago reported, his usual hostility replaced by grudging respect for her courage. Says he owns you, says you stole from him before running away. Inola's blood froze. Cornelius. Somehow, the plantation owner had survived the Apache raid and convinced the military that she was a valuable fugitive worth pursuing across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. He lies about owning me, she said firmly, but he'll never stop hunting me. Men like him see losing property as losing face. The final confrontation was inevitable now. But as they prepared for what might be their last stand, something unexpected happened. Other Apache bands began arriving to join them. Word had spread through the tribal networks about the couple whose love had defied both cultures, about the white woman who'd chosen death over surrender, about the children she'd risked everything to save. Warriors from distant clans rode into their mountain stronghold, offering their vows and their loyalty. Soon, what had begun as a desperate flight had transformed into something larger, a gathering of tribes united not just by ethnicity, but by principle. As Inola watched the camp expand with new arrivals, her hand resting on her still flat belly, she realized they weren't just fighting for their freedom anymore. They were fighting for the right to choose love over law, family over fear, hope over hatred. The war that was coming would determine not just their fate, but the fate of every couple who dared to love across the boundaries others insisted were absolute. And win or lose, their child would be born into a world where such love was possible, where a slave could become a queen not through birthright, but through the courage to claim her crown. The mountain stronghold buzzed with activity as Apache clans from across the Southwest continued to arrive. What had begun as a desperate flight had evolved into something unprecedented, a unified gathering of tribes who rarely cooperated, all rallying around the symbol of Ayansh and Inola's defiant love. Among the new arrivals was Victorio, a legendary war chief whose very name struck fear into cavalry officers across the region. His weathered face bore the scars of countless battles, and his presence lent credibility to their cause that even skeptical tribal elders couldn't ignore. "Your woman has brought something new to our people," Victorio told Ayansh during a war council. "She shows that Apache heart can beat in any chest, any color skin. This is powerful medicine." But power came with responsibility. As de facto leaders of the Confederation, Ayansh and Inola found themselves planning not just for their survival, but for a campaign that could reshape the balance of power in the territory. Their mountain fortress commanded strategic passes through the region, and if they could hold it, they could dictate terms to the advancing cavalry. Enola's pregnancy progressed through the spring, her body changing as the child grew within her. The Apache women surrounded her with protective care, sharing ancient wisdom about carrying and birthing children in times of war. Her morning sickness was treated with carefully prepared teas, and her growing belly was painted with symbols of protection and strength. "Child knows it comes into time of change," observed Naratena, her weathered hands gentle as she felt for the baby's position. "Strong kicks, this one. Fighter like mother and father both." The military expedition finally reached their vicinity in late spring, establishing a fortified camp at the base of the mountains. Through careful scouting, they learned the force numbered nearly 300 soldiers, supported by Apache traders, and a group of civilian volunteers led by a familiar figure, Cornelius, his face bearing a jagged scar from his encounter with Ionch's tomahawk. The plantation owner had convinced military commanders that Enola possessed valuable intelligence about Apache weaknesses, knowledge gained during her months with the tribe. The lie gave him official backing for his personal vendetta, and he'd brought a substantial reward to tempt potential informants. "He still sees you as property," Ihonch observed as they watched the enemy camp from a concealed observation post. "Cannot accept that property might choose freedom. Then he's about to learn what free people fight like." Enola replied, her hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. The siege began with psychological warfare. Cornelius used captured Apache prisoners to shout messages up the mountain, promising amnesty for anyone who surrendered the white squaw and her savage husband. When that failed, he tried bribes, offering horses and supplies to anyone willing to betray their location. But the mountain community had transformed into something neither side had expected: a functioning society that combined the best of both worlds. Enola's literacy had established schools where Apache children learned to read and write, while she absorbed lessons in traditional medicine and spiritual practices that connected her more deeply to her adopted culture. Their defensive preparations were equally innovative. Apache stealth tactics combined with strategic knowledge, gleaned from Enola's observations of military procedures during her plantation years. They created a network of hidden positions, supply caches, and escape routes that turned the mountain into a maze of deadly surprises for any invading force. The first serious assault came at dawn on a misty morning in late May. Soldiers advanced up 3 different paths simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm the defenders through superior numbers. But they walked into carefully prepared ambush that turned their numerical advantage into a liability in the narrow mountain passes. Enola, despite her pregnancy, insisted on participating in the defense. Her knowledge of cavalry tactics proved invaluable in predicting enemy movements and positioning defenders for maximum effect. She moved through the fighting positions like a ghostly general, coordinating the defense with quiet authority that even veteran warriors respected. "She fights like changing woman herself," one old warrior commented, referring to the most powerful figure in Apache mythology. "Brings new life while defending the people." By noon, the military assault had collapsed into chaotic retreat. Dead soldiers littered the mountain paths, and the survivors limped back to their base camp with tales of supernatural Apache warriors, who seemed to appear and disappear like spirits, but victory came with a price. Several Apache defenders had fallen, and ammunition was running dangerously low. More concerning, military engineers were constructing heavy artillery positions that could shell their mountain stronghold from long range. "They cannot take mountain by storm," Victorio assessed during a post-battle council. "So now they try to starve us out or blow us off mountain with big guns." That night, as Enola tended wounded warriors with traditional healing methods enhanced by techniques learned during her enslaved years, she felt the baby kick restlessly within her womb. The child seemed to sense the tension, responding to her elevated heartbeat with increased movement. Little one grows impatient, Apache observed, his hand joining hers on her belly. Wants to be born into world of freedom, not world of war. Then, we'd better end this war quickly, Enola replied with grim determination. Her plan was audacious beyond anything either side had contemplated, a direct assault on the military command post, timed to coincide with a general Apache retreat that would appear to be a panicked flight. If successful, it would decapitate the expedition's leadership and force the surviving soldiers to withdraw. If it failed, it would likely cost both their lives and leave their unborn child an orphan. But as artillery, shells began falling on their mountain sanctuary the next morning, shattering ancient stones and threatening the lives of everyone they'd sworn to protect. Both Ayanch and Enola knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. The final gambit would determine whether their love story ended in tragedy or triumph, and whether their child would be born free or never born at all. The artillery bombardment continued for 3 days, each explosion shaking the mountain to its foundations. Ancient caves collapsed, and several Apache elders who'd lived through decades of warfare declared they'd never seen such devastating firepower brought against their people. But the shelling also created opportunities, chaos, and confusion that masked the movements of small, determined groups of warriors. Enola's plan required precise timing and absolute trust. While the main Apache force prepared an elaborate feint retreat designed to draw soldiers into pursuit, a small strike team would infiltrate the military camp during the confusion. Their target, the command tent where Cornelius and the cavalry officers planned their operations. I should lead the strike, argued Victorio, but Enola shook her head firmly. They expect Apache warriors, she replied. They don't expect a pregnant white woman who knows their routines and can walk through their camp without raising immediate alarm. The debate was fierce but brief. Time was running short. The artillery had found their range, and each hour brought more destruction to their mountain sanctuary. Worse, scouts reported that reinforcements were approaching from Fort Bowie, including more Apache traders willing to fight their own people for army gold. Ayanch's face was stone as he helped his wife prepare for what might be their final mission. Together. Her pregnancy was unmistakable now, but a stolen cavalry cape helped disguise her condition as she transformed herself back into something resembling a white woman seeking sanctuary with the soldiers. If something goes wrong, he whispered as he painted her face with symbols of protection and courage, promise you will think of child first, yourself second. Promise me the same thing, she replied, placing her hands over his. Our baby needs at least one parent to survive this. The feint began at sunset, with Apache warriors streaming down the mountain in apparent panic, driving horses and carrying possessions as if in desperate flight. The ruse worked perfectly. Cavalry units charged up the mountain in pursuit, leaving the base camp lightly defended by support personnel and wounded soldiers. Enola walked into the enemy camp like a ghost returning from the dead. Her appearance, disheveled, pregnant, clearly traumatized, told a perfect story of an escaped captive seeking protection. Soldiers who challenged her were told she carried important intelligence about Apache positions, and she was quickly escorted toward the command area. Meanwhile, Ayanch and 3 other warriors moved through the camp's perimeter like shadows, using the diversionary artillery barrage to mask their approach. They'd studied the camp's layout for days, noting guard rotations and identifying key targets. The reunion with Cornelius was everything Enola had expected and dreaded. The plantation owner's scarred face twisted with satisfaction when guards brought her into his tent. The prodigal slave returns, he sneered, circling her slowly. Though I see you've been busy consorting with savages. Carrying one of their bastards, are you? I carry my husband's child, Enola replied with quiet dignity. A free child who will never know chains. Cornelius's laugh was cruel. Your husband will be dead by morning, and that half-breed spawn will be sold to the highest bidder. As for you, ... He gestured to a set of specially prepared shackles. You're going back to Louisiana, where proper discipline will remind you of your place. But as he reached for the chains, Ihonch exploded through the tent wall in a blur of muscle and fury. His tomahawk found Cornelius's throat before the man could draw breath to scream, ending 10 years of nightmares with a single, decisive stroke. Around the camp, the other warriors struck simultaneously. Supply wagons erupted in flames, ammunition. Stores exploded in cascading detonations, and the carefully organized military expedition dissolved into chaos. But the real masterstroke was Enola's capture of the expedition's communication. Equipment and detailed maps. As dawn broke over the mountains, the surviving soldiers found themselves leaderless, their supplies destroyed, and their strategic intelligence compromised. The Apache Confederation, meanwhile, had gained detailed knowledge of military plans and troop movements throughout the territory. The war ended not with a climactic battle, but with a negotiated withdrawal. Faced with the choice between a costly campaign against unified Apache tribes or focusing resources on more strategically valuable territories, the Army Command chose discretion over valor. 3 months later, as autumn painted the mountains in brilliant gold and crimson, Enola gave birth to their daughter during the harvest moon ceremony. The little girl emerged into the world with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined spirit, her first cries echoing off canyon walls that had witnessed the transformation of a slave into a queen. Ayasha, Naratina whispered as she placed the baby in Enola's arms. She who lives. The name carried deeper meaning in Apache culture, one who survives against impossible odds, who brings life from the shadow of death. As Enola held her daughter, surrounded by the Apache family who'd chosen to accept her, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. From the plantation's whipping post to the mountain's sacred places, from chains and degradation to love and respect, from slave to queen of her own destiny, Ihonch sat beside them, his warrior's hands gentle as he stroked his daughter's tiny fingers. She will grow up free, he murmured, free to choose her own path, her own loves, her own battles. And she'll know the story, Enola added, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. She know that love is stronger than law, that family is stronger than fear, that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from the courage to choose connection over division. The years that followed brought peace to their mountain sanctuary. The Apache Confederation, strengthened by their victory and unified by shared purpose, established territories that the government grudgingly learned to respect. Enola became known throughout the Southwest as a bridge between worlds, a healer who treated both Apache and white patients, a negotiator who prevented conflicts through understanding rather than violence. Their daughter, Ayasha, grew into a remarkable young woman who embodied the best of both her parents' worlds. She spoke 3 languages fluently, could track game through trackless wilderness, and read classical literature with equal skill. When she came of age, young men from many tribes sought her hand, but she chose her own path, establishing a school that taught Apache children the skills they'd need to navigate a changing world while preserving their cultural heritage. On quiet evenings, when 3 generations gathered around their fire, Ayasha would ask her mother to tell again the story of how a slave became a queen through an Apache's love. And Enola would smile, her weathered hands touching the turquoise pendant that Desba had given her so many years ago, and begin once more the tale of courage, transformation, and the power of love to conquer seemingly impossible odds. Remember, my child, she would always conclude, a queen is not made by crown or bloodline, but by the strength to choose freedom over fear, love over hatred, and family over all the forces that would divide us. That is the true crown, one that no one can take away, because you forge it yourself in the fires of your own courage.